Hey y'all, welcome back, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out another one of my videos. Or if you're new around here, hello and welcome. My name is Katie Marie, and we are going to be diving into a very fun video today, centered all around the palettes that I tried in 2021. And I did this the previous year. I thought it was so much fun, and I wanted to continue it. And even though I'm doing it late in January instead of December, we're still going to do it. But what I did the previous year is I took the first half and last half of the palette that I tried in 2020, so the first 6 months and the last 6 months, and I battled them against each other. So for each of the months I took, the number 16 palette for the first half of the year and the number 16 palette for the last half of the year, and I had to hold them up and say which one I preferred. And it was a lot of fun, especially as we got down to the top few, because obviously they both made the top because I really loved them. It was hard. If you missed that video, I will leave it linked up here, but I wanted to go ahead and do that again with 2021's palette. So I have my palette from the first half of 2021 sitting here, as well as the last half of 2021 sitting here. We almost had it perfect 30-30, but I do have, I think, 30 and like 35. So we'll go over a couple of the palettes that aren't going to be in the competition because there's just not enough palettes. I tried way more in the first half of the year than I did in the last half of the year. But anyway, we'll get all into that. My makeup today, I feel like Giovanna. If you don't know who she is, I will leave her link down below, her Instagram and her YouTube. She is the graphic liner queen. She always does so many fun things when it comes to graphic liner. And I usually don't do a whole lot because I tend to go all out with eyeshadow. You guys know me, I love eyeshadow. So I usually just add a little bit of graphic liner. But today I wasn't feeling too great. If you missed the video, I'll leave it linked up here. This morning I wasn't feeling too great, so I really didn't want to do too much with my eye makeup, so hence why I did this. And this is actually inspired from another Instagrammer. I will leave their handle down below if you want to check it out, but I really like how it turned out. So yeah, with that said, I think we can jump right into battling the palettes from 2021 together, and we'll see which wins. I'm always curious to see at the end. I'll tally it up, but we're going to see which one wins overall, either the first half of 2021 or the last half of 2021. Let's get into it. Okay, before we get into battling the 2 months, let's go ahead and go over for the first half of the month. I tried, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 palettes more than I tried the last half. So these are 6 palettes here, but another one that I've already passed along. 7 palettes I'm not going to be including in the countdown because I have nothing to compare it to when it comes to the last half of the year. So just to run over them real quick, the palette that I got rid of is the Ciate London. Oh, what is it called? I can't even remember. I will put the picture here. That's how much of an impression it left on me. I think I passed along to one of my sisters who wanted a very neutral palette. Then after that came the So Amazing palette by Clarity Cosmetics, and then the BK Beauty True Beauty palette. After that came the DD Signature Peach palette, and the Ofra Cosmetics Mini Mix palette, the Chill Out Yvette Beauty palette, and then the Coconut palette from DD Signatures. All of these were either, they had a lot of light tones in them and whatnot, and just a very light toned in general, or had a lot of glitters like the Chill Out palette had, or was horrible to work with, or like this one was a very neutral and a tiny little palette. So that's kind of why they ended up at the very bottom of my countdown for the first half of 2021. So yeah, those are the palettes. I just kind of wanted to run over them very briefly. I will of course have the video where I rank all of the first half of 2021 as well as the last half of 2021 palettes. I'll leave the videos linked down below if you want to go in depth, because I'm not going to go that in depth here today. I'm sure I'll get a little bit into the palettes and like what I like about them, but if you want even more in depth, I will leave those videos linked down below and you can hear my thoughts on all the palettes. Alright, so here we are starting at palette 30. I'm not going to keep count, but just saying that's where we're starting at. But first up, for the first half of the year was ColourPop Star Wars Mandalorian palette. I'll keep all the first halves on my left. And then for the last half was the Juvia's Place the Rebel Grays palette, this guy right here. I did enjoy the grays. There wasn't a whole lot of depth, but that gray went pretty dark. However, there's just more variety in here. I really do love greens. You guys know I like greens, so that's kind of an easy lean towards the Mandalorian palette. I wasn't quite like thrilled to use this long term, like with a bunch of looks. I think I did like 2 or 3 looks and I was pretty much done, just because I felt like with this color story and the ColourPop formula for the mattes and shimmers, it's just got a little bit kind of repetitive and samey no matter what I used. But same could be said for the grays. I think I did 2 looks with this and that was plenty enough for me because I felt like both looks looked exactly the same. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Mandalorian palette. I really did like the looks, especially in comparison, and comparing these two together. I definitely much more prefer playing with the ColourPop Mandalorian because I could get more looks. They're green looks, they're fun, they're sparkly and whatnot. Whereas this, there just wasn't enough variety for me. Next up is the Shaki Cosmetics Feminist palette, and this is going to go against the Juvia's Place the Rebel Mints palette. Okay, so these, I feel like it's going to be easy for the Shaki Cosmetics one, just because there's just more you can do. And I was honestly pleasantly surprised with this Shaki Cosmetics palette. It was a lot more fun to play with than I anticipated. I had to get very creative because there are a ton of shimmers and not enough mattes for me, and a lot of the mattes are just more, you know, neutral brown or whatnot, or just very soft. However, it did make me step outside my comfort zone. There are some darker shimmers in there, and I had fun with this, so I'm gonna give it to the Shaki Cosmetics one. While I do like this for a nice kind of, you know, very pastel looking palette, it needs a little bit more for me. You know, the two mattes were just so very similar, you almost couldn't tell a difference, so there just wasn't enough in this palette for me to enjoy using it for more than like one look. Next up is going to be at Forest Sight, the Raw Beauty Christie palette. This is with ColourPop, and then that's going to go against the Rebel Honey palette by Juvia's Place. The first half of 2021 is gonna beat out a lot of the last half because I wasn't a big fan of these quads. Anyway, obviously this is a no-brainer. It goes to the At Forest Sight palette. As much as I'm not the biggest fan of ColourPop's formula, their matte formula, especially when you get into the deeper tones, I feel like I tend to more days than not have issues with sticking, patching, or just not wanting to blend out very nicely. However, it does work. You know, I can make it work for a look and whatnot. It does create very beautiful looks. I love this color story, and overall I just really had a great time with this palette, and I loved how many mattes I got to work with, and these tones are just so me. So trying to, you know, compete and compare these two, sorry, what is this, the Rebel Honey, you had no shot, because this is a very kind of neutral, yes, a warm tone palette, so these are the kind of neutral tones that I enjoy playing with, but it just didn't have enough for me. I had one shimmer, these two mattes are so very similar, it just didn't have enough for me, so sorry. Next up is from Glam Shop. I think this is called Lemon or Lemonade. I'm not sure how to pronounce the Polish word, but this is their palette, and that's going to go against the Juvia's Place, the Rebel Army palette. This one gets a little bit harder because you guys know I love depth, so there's a lot of depth in here, as repetitive as this palette is, because there's just two very dark tones and then two almost very similar. I mean, the shimmers are different, but they're still, I wish one had been like super bright and almost like the color I have on my lid with the kind of duochrome green instead of this dark tone. Anyway, but this one, while I do love their shimmers, Glam Shop shimmers are very beautiful. They remind me of what I have on my eyes, which is DD Signatures. They do remind me of that, just so sparkly and so amazing, but there's no depth in here. Like absolutely no depth. And that was what was really missing for me from this palette, and one of the reasons it landed so low in my countdown. However, this yellow is just so blinding. I've got to give it to this palette because I love those yellows. That it was like almost a neon yellow. It was so beautiful. So sorry, none of the Rebel quads are going to make it into this battle. It's going to go to the Lemon palette or Lemonade, whatever this one is. All right, continuing on. This is the Starry Night from Storybook Cosmetics, and that's going to get battled against the Musée or Kayla Beauty Honor palette. Let me open this up one-handed. Here it is. Trying not to blind you guys with the mirrors. This is an easy one for me. As much as I like that this was soft, but it still had colorful options, I think they did a good job kind of catering to more neutral or just soft tone, you know, makeup wearing people, but still giving a little bit of interest. They did do that very well because there's that really pretty gold and green and blue in this palette. But when you compare it to this, it's just like this color story is so much more me. The Starry Night palette is so much fun. I didn't think the quality of this palette was absolutely outstanding, but I did like the color story. It does work very well. I have, I think, 2 different videos where I do a look with this, so you can kind of see the quality of it. But overall, I just like the color story. It was a lot of fun. A very fun, a blue, grungy green with a little bit of yellow and orange. It just was so much fun. So yeah, this one is very easy for me. It's definitely going to the first half of the year and not to the last half. So I think in the first 5, all of them have gone to the first half of the year so far. I should have said this in the beginning, but let me know your guesses down below. Which do you think will win and have more palettes, the first half or last half of 2021? Okay, moving on. Next, we have the first half of the year was the Sweet and Sticky Give Me Glow palette, and then the last half was the Makeup Maniac Cosmetics Green Goddess number 3 palette. This is hard because this palette is a green palette, but something was missing in this palette that did make me love it. And with it being a green palette, it kind of stumps me even right now as I sit here and look at it. I'm like, what is it about this that I don't like it? Because I should like it because it's like an amazing green palette, but there wasn't a ton of depth to it. And a lot of the shades in here I feel like are just very close, so I felt like I was being very repetitive with the looks that I got. And with it being such a large palette, I think I didn't expect to really need to repeat looks because there's just so many shadows, but some of these tones are very similar or just so light that you can't really tell a difference. I think that's what it was. Anyway, and then this, I really love the intensity of this. This is like a neutral palette that I really do like, but it is a neutral palette, so I'm like, shouldn't the green palette win out over the neutral palette? But I mean, Give Me Glow quality is so very nice. These shimmers in this palette are so blinding and stunning, like a gorgeous metallic, so very pretty. that I'm gonna give it to the first half. This Sweet and Sticky palette. It's a neutral palette that I can use and I can love the final look that I just think is so very fun. Whereas typically if it's just a boring neutral palette, I do a look and I'm like so bored. But no, every look that I did with this palette I thought was so very pretty, so very fun. So gonna give it to the first half, the Sweet and Sticky palette. All right, let's see. Next we have the El Barrio by Terra Moon Cosmetics, and that's gonna go against the Half Cake Snack Pack palette. I feel so bad, but it's definitely going to the El Barrio palette because there's just so much depth, there's so much richness in this, and then this has shimmers that are just, the shimmers from Terra Moon Cosmetics are just so stunning, so beautiful. They're just so like, almost like liquid metallic when they're on your eyes. They're beautiful. So with a palette like this, having a good mix of like neutral mauve tones in there with these three over here that I wasn't the biggest fan of, it's gonna go to the El Barrio. Very, very easy here. So last half of the year of 2021 is not looking so hot right now. Okay, next up is the Nomad Cosmetics Shanghai palette, which looks like this. And then that's against the Actius Lunas palette. I think it's just called Actius. I'm sorry, I'm butchering that. It's from Actius Luna Cosmetics, and it's just Actius Luna's palette. Anyway, this is hard. I really did like this color story. This was a whole lot of fun. I love the different type of combinations I could do with all the colors, but these shimmers are also absolutely stunning. However, the mattes in here were just not. With that said though, the mattes in here aren't too bad if I just stuck to the black here and the greens up here. This shimmer also is pretty. It was mainly these right here that were just absolutely boring. However, like I said, if I stick to the greens and the black, mixing it with these shimmers, I could get like so many looks that I loved. Whereas this, there's not a whole lot of depth. Like the purple or the reddish tones down here does get a little deep, but it's not incredibly deep. And then the shimmers, two of them were kind of duds for me. Two of them were very pretty. I think I'm gonna give it to the Shanghai palette because, I mean, as much as I don't like how many very like throwaway mattes there are for me in this palette, the shimmers in this palette were so beautiful, were so special. I did a bunch of looks with this in a video when it first came out if you want to see. I had so much fun combining all these tones together. The green and yellow and orange were just so beautiful on the lid. Yeah, I'm gonna give it to the Shanghai palette. Next is going to be the Monet Jasper palette. This is from M Cosmetics. Oh, this is looking rough. My son must have gotten into it at some point. That's going to go against the K-Love Beauty Triumph of Venice palette. I need to look at it before I open it. These two. This is hard. I really do like the cool toneness and the mix of colors in this palette, but then I also really do like this. The shimmers in both of these palettes are really nice. They're actually kind of similar if I'm sitting here thinking about it. It's been a little while since I've used the M Cosmetics one, but the shimmers are both very beautiful, very smooth, very pigmented, go on easy. Ooh, this is hard. I think I'm gonna give it to this palette just because I like the coolness and the blue tones that I got from this palette, and it was a lot of fun mixing it with the warm tones down here with the more orangey terracotta shades. Whereas this, while it's very pretty and does also have blue in it, it's kind of lean more on the like mauve warm tones here in the middle, more so, but it has that pop of yellow that I really like too. I'm gonna give it to the last half. I'm gonna give it to the Triumph of Venice. I really did like this palette. Sorry, this is hard. It's gonna get hard from here on out, I know, but that battle was hard. Next up is gonna be Give Me Glow's Vivid Rose for the first half of 2021. Here's what it looks like. Oh, sorry, my nose itches. And then the last half is gonna be the Lethal Cosmetics and Teresa is Dead, the Lethal is Dead palette that looks like this. This is hard. I love the depth that you can get in here with this palette. I love Give Me Glow shimmers, as I always say, but it is like a pink and purple palette. So when I'm thinking of palette and color stories that I like to play with, the fun, color combinations in this palette, I'm definitely a little bit more leaning towards, especially with the green and the blues. Had a lot of fun. I think I'm gonna give it to Give Me Glow because the shimmers in here are outstanding. I love them. I wasn't a big fan of the shimmers in here, and I mean, this also has two mauve tones, kind of pinky purpley in here. And this one, like this hot pink, was outstanding, like out of this world. So I think I'm going to give it to Give Me Glow and not to Lethal Cosmetics. So sorry. Next for the first half of the year is the ColourPop's Fade into Hues palette, and that's battling against the Lady Nay from Metamorphosis Cosmetics. Can I open this one-handed? I don't think I can. Okay, there we go. Here they are. This also seems unfair because this is such a large palette. It's a rainbow palette in so many colors, whereas this is so small and concise, but I really did enjoy this palette. The shimmers didn't exactly blow me away, but they are very nice, and with saying that though, like I'm honestly not a big fan of ColourPop shimmers either. I feel like of the two, I think I prefer these. These have a little bit more sparkle to them, but they're always like such a soft look on your eyes, whereas these, at least they stand out. Anyway, oh, I don't know, but I do like my rainbow looks. I had so many fun looks with this, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the formula, and the shimmers were always kind of I'm sorry, but I have to give it to the rainbow palette. You guys know I love fun, colorful looks, and to be able to get tons of options. And this, even though I don't use the glitters, and I'm not a fan of the shimmers, there's so many colorful options. There's so many fun looks I did with this palette, so gonna give it to ColourPop. Next is gonna be from Odin's Eye, the Erd palette. This was the first palette I ever tried from them, and that's gonna be battled against the DD Cosmetics Juicy Skewer palette. Oh, this is really hard because I really did love that yellow, and that shimmer in here is just so special and beautiful. However, this is like a grungy, this is my grungy neutral dream. This is so very pretty, so I'm gonna give it to Odin's Eye Erd. You guys know I love my greens, so as much as this was fun and different for me and got me to like colors outside my typical, you know, sphere and my typical comfort zone, still, it doesn't beat out my favorite grungy colors. Next up is going to be the Myers Cosmetics Volume 2 palette. This is days after I heard that Myers Cosmetics is going to be closing in 2022. And I'm still, it still hasn't sunk in. Like, I'm just so sad. I'm so sorry to hear that. Anyway, the Artistry Volume 2 palette. I really did enjoy this little palette. It's a great little grungy color story with that fun little pop of red, and they're nice deep tones. The shimmers are beautiful. That's going against the Cash Beauty Color Trip palette that I had very mixed feelings on. I love the mattes, the colorful mattes in this palette, but I'm not a fan of the shimmers, even though there are only 3. And I'm not a fan of the cake liners because they're just a pain. Kind of just the same story with the ColourPop. I have to give it with the more colorful options just because I did so many looks with this palette that were just so very beautiful. So I'm gonna give it to the Color Trip palette from Cash Beauty. Even though I do love my grungy colors, and I did really like this little 6-pan palette, but I'm gonna give it to Cash Beauty. All right, next for the first half is gonna be the Peppermint Mocha from Ruby May. Such a fun little palette. I really did enjoy this color story. And that's going against the Odin's Eye Red Dragon palette that they collaborated with Judy on. Ooh, which one? I don't know. I'm gonna give it to this one. This is just such a fun color story. Like I said, that red is just so intensely bright. I love the green, I love the silver. There's just so much in here that even though it's a tiny little palette, you can create some really fun, unique, and different type of looks every time you dip into it, and I love that about it. I do love the Judy's palette, the Red Dragon palette. The green, the grungy corner up here, I absolutely loved. The shade in here that was multichrome, absolutely beautiful, but oh, this is hard, but I'm gonna pick the Peppermint Mocha palette. Okay, first half is DD Signature's Passion Fruit quad. This was a very fun quad. And that's going against the What's Up Beauty Desert Monsoon palette. Oh, this is looking rough. I am just so rough on my makeup palettes. But anyway, I love this color combination. This was so much fun with the very neon orange and the dark purple matte mixed with those very special shimmers. However, the shimmers in here are also very, very beautiful. Not a whole lot of variety with the mattes, but you just have more to it. So I think I'm going to give it to the Desert Monsoon. I really did like the green shimmers in here as well. Very beautiful. And yeah, especially the darker shimmers up here were just so very, very, very beautiful. So it definitely stretched me that I had to kind of get creative using more shimmers to get a look that I really liked because the mattes were just so, you know, so neutral. But I did really enjoy this palette. So I'm going to give it to the Desert Monsoon and not to the Passion Fruit quad, even though I really do like this quad. Next up is going to be from Endangered Cosmetics, the Red Panda palette, and that's going up against the last half of the year, and it's Menagerie Cosmetics Indigo Ink palette. Again, trying to open them one-handed. This is a no-brainer. I'm going to go with Indigo Ink. As much as there were aspects about this palette that I wasn't crazy about, you can see my full review, there's still something I love about this palette because it's just so unique when it comes to the color story. This shade here, what is this called? Nori, this shade. One of my favorite looks. I did a look with that, I think the blue on the outer corner, but I used, which one of these? I think it was Ink Defense. I can't even remember. I used one of the multi-chromes all over my lid and I took a picture, put it on my Instagram. It was one of my most liked pictures of 2021. I can't remember in what order, but it was pretty high on the list. It was one of my favorite looks I did with this palette. It was just so very pretty. So yeah, it's gonna go to this. As much as I do like the Endangered Cosmetics for a really nice neutral palette, this palette is just, I gotta give it to it. It was very unique. Next is going to be the Pure Cosmetics and Raw Beauty Christy palette. This was a gift from a subscriber because I totally missed this launch, but it's that palette that had both sides. I'll just open it to the colorful side because you guys know that's the one that I was most excited for. And that's going against the Endangered Cosmetics Sea Turtle palette for the last half of the year. That's funny. The Endangered Cosmetics was like one away from battling each other in the countdown. I just think that's funny. Okay, so let's see. Oh, this is hard because you guys know I like my colorful colors and this has a lot of very colorful mattes, but this This palette was also really nice. The shimmers were beautiful. There's only 2 shimmers in this palette and both are just like an iridescent. Very soft, kind of to me a throwaway shadow because they weren't anything too special. I mean, this shade it was pretty. It was nice. It just didn't do a whole lot for me. And as opposed to that, the shimmers in here were very pretty. But there's just more colorful shadows in here. Oh, this is hard. I don't know what to do. What should I do? I think I'm going to give it to the Pure Cosmetics and Raw Beauty Christie just because there's just more colorful options. And even the neutrals, as much as I didn't reach into the side too much, I did like the more grungy mustards over here, especially the shade right here. And I could use and mix and match them depending on what I was doing over here. And I like that all the looks that I got were like very colorful, but had like a neutral kind of spin on them that kind of made them, in my eyes, very easy and wearable. So I'm going to give it to this palette and not to Endangered Cosmetics Sea Turtle palette. Sorry, Endangered Cosmetics. I put both of yours in the no pile. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's keep on going. K-Lab. I think I'm saying that right. Let me know if I'm not. This is the Rococo palette, and that's going against the Oden's Eye Cat's Breath palette. Oh, this is hard. There's aspects I love about both of them. However, right off the bat, my heart goes to the Cat's Breath palette because I love this combination of orange and green. It's what I got in my eyes today. I got orange and green on. Hey, look at that. So yeah, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and go with this palette. I could have used one of these to put on my lid for today's look because it really would have gone. I think the what is it, Wool Ball? That's a really pretty one. Anyway, I do really like this palette. It was a little bit, like, obviously in the countdown, not super high, but the quality was there. If you like all pastel colors, very pastel looking palette, you could get it. I was a little disappointed that there was just so much emphasis on the like neutral type of shimmers. There wasn't enough colorful shimmers in this palette for me. But with that said, it was a nice quality and I did, you know, get several looks that I really did like out of this palette. But with all that said, I'm gonna go with the Cat's Breath and not the Rococo palette. All right, let's see. Next up is going to be the Natasha Denona Circle Local palette that I tried in the first half of 2021. That's battling against Kaleidos and Angelica Nyquist's Club Nebula palette. This is hard because if I'm talking about just the shimmers, I would go with the Natasha Denona because the more colorful shimmers are just so much more impactful and the Kaleidos is very much more of a sheerish type of formula, which is just not my preference. So immediately when I'm thinking about the shimmers, I go to the Natasha Denona. However, the mattes in here were just so very nice and I love that green up there. The green's gonna get me. Whereas this one, it had some really nice deep tones, but a lot of the deep tones were shimmers. So that's a little bit, you know, of a negative for me. And there just wasn't a whole lot of mattes. I did enjoy how many mattes there were in here. So that's where I'm kind of like Kaleidos for the mattes and Natasha Denona for the shimmers. But you guys know me, I'm more of a matte girl. So that's what I'm going to vote for. I'm going to go for the Kaleidos and Angelica Nyquist Club Nebula palette because I love the mattes and the looks that I got using the mattes especially were just so very pretty. I do like the Natasha Denona Circle Local palette, but like I said, there's not a whole lot of mattes in here while the shimmers were outstanding. And the looks that I got were so pretty. I don't know, I have to decide. So I'm going to go with Club Nebula and just stop torturing myself. Next up is going to be the DD Signature Blueberry Quad. Oh, this was such a good quad. So very special. The only thing that would have made it like a 10 out of 10 and like got super high in my countdown from the first half was if one of these blues had been like a neon bright blue. That would have sealed the deal and it probably would have beaten out the Avocado palette that we're going to talk about later because the shimmers in this palette were so special. But anyway, that's going against the Milan Row and Doodles by the Bunny Poison Ivy palette. This palette also so very pretty. I love the formula when it comes to Milan Row's shadows. The mattes in here are absolutely beautiful. They don't swatch well. I did an Instagram reel where I swatched them out just so you guys could see the colors and whatnot. And they don't swatch the greatest, which I don't know why. I think I'm just a terrible swatcher because, oh my goodness, on the eyes, you guys can see I did 3 or 4 looks in my review video. They're amazing. They're like butter. They go over so smoothly, gorgeously. The shimmers in here aren't my biggest. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of them. They're just okay. So the shimmers in this quad definitely beat out these shimmers, but there's just more mattes in here. So I'm kind of leaning toward the Milan Row. But oh my goodness, the shimmers in here are so beautiful. I don't know what to do. I feel like I should stay consistent, and usually when I have a palette with a lot of options over a small palette, I've been picking the bigger one just because you guys know I love options and I never like doing the same look twice. So that's kind of why I always kind of lean towards the one with more options because I have more options to not do the same look twice. So I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for Poison Ivy. As much as it hurts me not to pick this palette because these shimmers in here, they're just, I know I wasn't going to touch them, but like, oh my goodness, did that even, oh, I touched the matte. Oops. Hang on. Look at this. It's just So beautiful. It doesn't do it justice, trust me when I say it's 10 times more beautiful, but I'm not gonna pick it, so. Okay, moving along, we have the Playing in Makeup by Giovanna Jamrock Colored Wasashini, the Pastel Eyeshadow Palette. This huge palette, let me go ahead and hold it up and not blind you guys. That's going against the DD Signature Exotic Skewer Palette. Oh my goodness. I don't know what to do, because I was just saying to stay consistent, I'll go with the one with more options, so that's why I picked that one. But like when I'm holding these two up, as much as I love them, DD Signature's Exotic Skewer Palette, I really do like this palette, and the shimmers and both of the shimmers in these palettes are absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of colorful options you could do here. I don't know what to do. This, I did have a lot of colorful options to do, work with the mattes, but the shimmers I wasn't a huge fan of. I think Raven, this one was the only one I really liked. But there are just so many mattes that you can really do a lot with this palette, so I don't know. But I really do like this palette, and with it being a 6-pan palette, there are a lot of looks you can do and not really repeat looks with this palette. Okay, I'm just gonna go with my heart, and I'm really wanting to go with Exotic Skewer Palette, so I'm gonna pick this one and not the pastel palette by Playing in Makeup by Giovanna, even though I really did enjoy this palette. I don't know if I made the right decision, but I just, every time I look at the Exotic Skewer, it's like, I gotta pick that one. Okay, it's getting really hard. Next is gonna be the K-Love Beauty Van Gogh palette. I really love this little palette, so fun. This is going against the DD Signature's Tropical Skewer palette. I really did like this palette a lot. I love the blue and orange. Oh my goodness, such a fun combination, but I love this palette as well. And when we're talking about like neutral Katie, the tones in this palette, every look I ever did was just so me. I loved it so much. The shimmers in here are really pretty. The shimmers in this palette are very pretty as well. They're kind of like similar as I'm thinking about them now. Maybe not as soft. The DD Signatures is very soft to the touch. This is a little more firmly pressed, but they're both very smooth. They both go on pigmentedly, and this is not like that special shadow. Neither one of these are like that very special sparkly shadow of DD Signatures. They're just a really nice shimmer tone. They're just a really nice shimmer, almost metallic look. Oh my goodness, I think we're gonna go with this one. I love this palette, I do, but I love this palette just a little bit more. And we're talking about neutral Katie. This palette just steals my heart so much, so I'm gonna go with the Van Gogh palette. Okay, next up is the DD Signature's Avocado palette. This is going against DD Signature's Caramel Skewer palette. Oh, this is a no-brainer. I'm gonna go with the Caramel Skewer. As much as I love this palette, see, this is what I wish she had done with the blue. Having such a bright blue with the dark blue would have been great, because I love the dark green with such a bright green. So much fun. The looks that I got, the eye looks that I did with this were so very beautiful. I don't think this shimmer was as duochromy and sparkly and pretty as her other ones. But anyway, this palette is just so very beautiful. This is like a multi-chrome, and I think this one's multi-chrome too. So very beautiful, so intensely pigmented. Absolutely gorgeous. And then the mattes, there's just so many fun looks you can get with this, with these matte tones, mixing them together with the shimmers. I did a Christmas look with this that I absolutely loved. It was just a great palette. Absolutely love it. So this is very easy for me. I know DD Signature is kind of going head to head here, but Caramel Skewer is going to win out over the Avocado very easily. Okay, next for the first half is the You Beauty by Glaminatrix Cosmetics palette. Can't really bend it back very well. And that's going against the Ace Beauté Falling for You palette. Ooh, let's see. This is going to be easy for me as well, because as much as I was super impressed with the Falling For You palette, it's still a very like heavy on the mauves. And I did like it, not saying that I don't, and I was able to work with these more bold colors mixed in with the mauves to really get looks that I like. However, you guys see this palette, there's just so many options. I love the yellow, the red, the blue, the shimmers in here, there's multi-chromes in here. There's just so much about the Glaminatrix You Beauty palette that was just so much fun when I was using it. And yeah, so I think I'm going to go with that. The shimmers in here are just so very pretty. The shimmers in here are beautiful, but when we're looking at the mattes, you know, there's like 4 eyeshadows in this palette that I'm not the biggest fan of, and a lot of them, a couple of them I didn't really use. Whereas this palette, I think it was only one, the She'll Be Right, that I really wasn't a big fan of. Everything else was just so much fun to use, and I came up with such a unique, creative, and fun look, so it's gonna go to the You Beauty palette. Next up is gonna be Mice Cosmetics and Drench Cosmetics. This was the collab Genesis palette that they did earlier in the year, and that's going head to head against the Dirty Martini by Glamlight. I'm trying to open it here. Okay, this is gonna be easy because I really do like this color story. You guys know I like dirty greens, and this palette was just a lot of fun. As much as I feel like it's very heavy on the shimmers, it was still a lot of fun, and even though I'm not the biggest fan of the shimmers, the looks I created were very pretty. Whereas this palette, I really did enjoy this palette. I was very impressed with the quality. The pigmentation of the mattes are outstanding. However, it's a very like heavy on the neutral side, so when we're comparing like a green palette that's just like my favorite color story and just speaks to me, to a more neutral, colorful palette, the green is gonna win out, so it's going to the Dirty Martini. almost done here. I think we're on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, top 5. First half I gave to the Give Me Glow Pastel Dreams palette, the best pastel palette ever. You can't change my mind. Anyway, that's gonna go against the Odin's Eye Fancy Face Hummingbird palette collab. I'm sorry, Give Me Glow. As much as I do still think that your pastel palette is the best ever and like the only pastel palette you need to incorporate into any pastel looks you want, or great on its own. You guys know my love of depth and color, and that's just like it in a nutshell with the Hummingbird palette. So it's gonna have to go to the Hummingbird palette. The shimmers in here are beautiful. The shimmers in here are beautiful too. Both palettes have gorgeous shimmers, both palettes have gorgeous mattes, but I love depth and I love intense bold color, and that's what the Hummingbird palette gives to me. So I mean, pastels are beautiful, but they're definitely like not my vibe. I just enjoy dabbling in them. And when I do like the Pastel Dreams palette, but it was no competition for the Hummingbird palette. All right, next is the Nomad Iceland Fire and Ice palette. I really like this colorful, like cool, warm tone. Absolutely loved it. That's going against the Odin's Eye Giant Wolves palette. That was a collab with Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner. And I'm sorry, as much as I love the Nomad Iceland palette and the cool and warm tone combination, the Giant Wolves palette just blew my socks off and more. Annette did a great job with this palette, so I'm gonna have to go with this palette. It's got the grunge in it for me that I love. It's got the, you know, color, even the bright color. The multi-chrome in here was absolutely beautiful. So yeah, gonna give it to the Giant Wolves palette, and this is a great palette. It's no competition for the Giant Wolves. I'm so sorry. And next one, I'm so sorry, Nomad. This is just not working out in your favor. This is the America's Parks palette that I also love. This is kind of like an extended version of the K-Lab Van Gogh palette that I love so much, but it's going against the Menagerie Cosmetics and Annette's from Annette's Makeup Corner's Serenity palettes. And I'm sorry, this palette is just gonna win by so much. I love the Serenity palette so much. Every time I dipped into this palette, I love the look that I ended up with, and it always felt so creative. I never felt repetitive. It was so colorful, so easy to work with. Loved both the mattes and shimmers, which is rare for me with Menagerie. Usually I don't like Menagerie shimmers, but I love the shimmers in this palette. The mattes were so very beautiful. This palette, as I said, is like an extended version of the Van Gogh palette. I love it so much, but if I have to choose, I can't not pick the Serenity palette because I love it that much. So I'm sorry, Nomad. I'm gonna say no. Okay, number 2 for both coming in number 2 from the first and last half. First half was Maya's Cosmetics and the Basic Bees Perception collab palette. This palette was so very good. And that's going against the Ace Beauté's Tropical Vibes palette. Oh, this is so hard because this is so colorful and fun. But this is so grungy, colorful, and fun. Like, not super colorful in different colors, but it's like colorful and green, like grungy, dirty green looks. So colorful. This is hard. But I'm gonna go with the Tropical Vibes palette because there's just something about this palette. This is like me in a nutshell when you want to talk about grungy greens that I love. This is the first one that always comes to mind, and it has, you know, different aspects to it as well with the different tones in there with the yellow and the more terracotta shade and that more of like a blue-green shade. You got some, you know, color variety in there. This palette, y'all, I really do love it. It's a beautiful, very colorful type of palette with very gorgeous, you know, almost duochrome type of shimmers in there. Very beautiful, but I gotta pick the Tropical Vibes palette. I'm so sorry. Okay, number 1 is so hard. First half of the year goes to LA Girl Main Stage palette. You guys have probably gotten sick of hearing me talk about how much I love this palette. I love it so much. It is so much fun. Every time I do a look with this palette, I absolutely love how it turns out. But going against it is the Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. And I'm just like, I gotta go with the Beauty Bay palette. I love this palette so very much. And while I do really like this palette just steals my heart when it's got grungy, colorful tones. Like, this just steals my heart so much. And while I love how colorful this is, and I love how colorful this gives me colorful grunge. So I'm going for the Wilderness palette and not for the LA Girl Main Stage palette, as much as I really do love this palette. Okay, what did you guys guess? Because we have a tie. I was not expecting this to happen, but we have 15 palettes from the first half of the year that I picked and 15 palettes from the last half of the year that I picked. So 2021 is split right down the middle when it comes to which palettes from first or last that I liked more, because it's 15-50, and I could not believe that when I sat here and counted it out. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. 15-15. If you guessed one or the other, I guess you're wrong because it's split down the middle. If anyone guessed that they thought it would be half and half, you guys are just like round of applause for you, because I did not think it was going to be half and half. I honestly thought before I sat down here, and I don't put much thought into what I'm going to pick until I sit down and record, but I honestly thought the last half of the year would win because there's just so many outstanding palettes at the last half of the year that just stole my heart so bad. But evidently there was also a ton of really good palettes launched in the first half of the year that just stole my heart as well when it came down to it, and I had to pick between the two of them. So yeah, 15-15 is the final count. So yeah, tied down the middle. This video was so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's just a fun way to sit down and get to look at the past year's palette one more time before I put them in their permanent homes back there and reorganize this whole thing for the new year. I'm excited to put them all back there because they've been living on my floor for pretty much the entire month of December and then partway of January now. So yeah, I'm ready to put them away. And yeah, I don't know how many I'm going to try in 2021. 2021 is going to be a crazy year, so I'm not anticipating that I'm going to have 60 plus palettes to review and, you know, duel out at the end of the year, but we'll see how many I get through, and we can do this again at the end of the year if you guys enjoyed it. So yeah, let me know down below. Did you guys enjoy this type of video, and would you like to see me do it at the end of 2022? And yeah, with all that said, per usual, I'm over on Instagram. I'm LadyKatie92 over there. You can check me out for reels, up close eye pictures, unboxings sometimes from Ipsy and BoxyCharm and all that. LadyKatie92. And with all that said, I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.